Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. No matter what time you are logging in, we want to welcome you to another episode of Pages to Progress. This is a ministry where we walk through challenging books on various different subject matter, and we intersect our faith and our Christianity and our own experiences with the authors, a bit like having a conversation with the authors themselves. Um, I'm joined here with Annabelle, Darlene, and Jessica. Thanks for joining us on this conversation. It's definitely been an interesting journey. I've been so grateful to have you ladies on this journey because you've definitely stretched my mind and pushed me in directions, and I appreciate that. We have been going through the book Trouble in the Water by Ben McBride. If someone could hold that up for our readers to, or our listeners to be able to see, this is the book. Thanks, Dee, for holding that up. If you want to follow the journey, we invite you. Go into the description, and you'll see the link with which will give you access to the book, whether it's digital or physical. Come join us on the questions, on the reflections. Today, we are talking about chapter 7, something that every single person on this Zoom call knows how to do so well, prioritizing radical self care. Would you agree, ladies? You all do it so well. It's probably the reason why we need to read this chapter, because I probably think each and every one of us could identify areas where we really need to prioritize self care. So, in this chapter, I feel like Ben McBride hangs on to one story that he basically packages the whole idea of his realizations, his understandings, and his maybe his illumination to the reality that self-care is in fact a part of the work of activism, of of fighting injustice, etc., etc., etc. I don't know if I've ever considered self-care to be part of the work. I've always considered self care to be something different. And it's something, admittedly, I get around to when I have time for it, or I am forced to make time for it in some way, fashion, or form. And it's really interesting because he builds the whole story around a story he started to set the scene of, where he saw an injustice within the Oakwood Police Department, specifically sexual harassment, and even trafficking. And finally, we get to the part of the story where the federal government, I believe it's the federal government, essentially calls out the Oakland Police Department, but not on those claims of sexual harassment and not on those claims of trafficking, but on some kind of different misdemeanor, which doesn't really hold much weight. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was it was kind of like an excuse where they avoided calling them out on this. As a result of that, Ben McBride decides to lead a large protest. Um, and he galvanizes all kinds of different support from different places, even to the point where he radically does something very active. He pours blood on the doorstep of the Oakland Police Department steps as a symbol to say that he and hundreds of others were unsettled and very, very angry at the fact that this very core issue was being ignored. All this to set the scene that after this protest takes place, Ben McBride goes through a series of different, I'm going to call it emotional breakdowns, where he has to deal with the repercussions of vitriol responses, whether it be death threats, whether it be anxieties, whether it be a fear that the police are coming after him. And the police are essentially trying to provoke fear in their presence and scare him and his family as a result. And he talks about how he mentally struggles with that process. As he went through the story, Um, admittedly, I can't say I totally relate in terms of fighting for injustice because I don't think that I do that in a robust way as he does it. There have been many moments where I've shied away from getting myself into so much activity because I'm trying to protect myself. I have, however, been involved in the work of overworking myself in the name of God as a justification as to why I don't deserve to step back and recharge. So I relate on that level and I get it. What Ben McBride does, he forces himself into a place where he is essentially prone to attack. And as a result of that, and a result of all the years of constantly being in fight or flight, he now has to deal with the management of his emotions. Those are my reflections. That's what I think so far initially. What are your thoughts, ladies, as you heard his story, as you reflected? Could you draw parallels to yourself?
I think you make a key point in that you make a key distinction in terms of he does something and he takes a position in which he's prone to attack. That's a key distinction from, an everyday type of activism. But I think an everyday type of activism is still activism in and of itself. Um, and burnout can happen just across the board. It had me questioning, okay, well, what is activism? What is, this radical activism that he is speaking of? Um, for example, D is, um, when I think about what Dee does for a living, I'm thinking, I mean, that in of itself is activism. In, you know, you're not just doing that kind of work for, a paycheck. You're doing that kind of work in order to care for someone else and their family. So it had me kind of questioning, okay, well, in what way, are we activists?
Mm,
I can say that, the work that I'm called to do, when I was called to be a physician and when I was called to be a psychiatrist, um, I felt as though the Holy Spirit had literally touched my brain. And even to this day, I feel that. I
mm,
will always say to someone, I am obsessed with what I do. I don't just have a passion for it, I am obsessed with it. Every person
mm,
that I treat, that I meet, is so different, and the journey that they go through is so very different.
mm,
And you know, that in of itself, I believe, is a form of activism.
mm,
I personally will tell you that I could not do what I do without being in individual therapy. And,
mm,
throughout my training, it was advised that, if you're going to go down this road of doing this work, you must do individual therapy.
mm,
It's a part of your training and what have you. But i- the thing is that that is a form of my self-care.
mm,
It just, I could not do this work without uh, that type of care. Um, so I think it can be as intimate
mm,
as basically seeking support in some way. Um, but
mm.
that is just my thought.
No, I think something came up for me as you were talking. Maybe there's a part of me that wants to minimize my idea of activism because I'm not pouring blood on the doorsteps of like at my I there's a temptation to see that I'm not an activist. I'm not part of doing the work. But I realized to myself, especially now in this season, so we just finished Black History Month, but I've been planning a series for the rest of the year, and we're gonna now. I'm really gonna focus on women's history because we've got Women's International Day coming up. Like I've really been pushed towards talking about and speaking out loud on some of the things that we need to talk about to decolonize and unlearn some destructive ways of thinking. That's the work. And it's exhausting to constantly be turned on. Like I mentioned this again and again, every news story is breaking news, and it's exhausting. And sometimes when you get to the stage where you're just like, I can't do this anymore, I need to step back, it's long overdue that you should have done that.
Mm,
You should have done that. We
mm,
shouldn't get to the points where we are forcibly on the brink of, I cannot do this anymore.
mm, mhm,
I think that we need to be more the inclusion of this chapter
mhm,
is so powerful
mhm,
because I wonder how much effort I include this chapter into the work I do, into the kingdom agenda of fighting for those who are marginalized, etc., etc., etc. No matter what shape it looks like for you. So yeah, that's what came up for me. I wanted to give some voice to that. Any thoughts, Jessica and Darlene? You're both being polite to let each other go
Go
first.
ahead, Jessica.
No, go ahead. You go ahead. I was waiting for you to go first.
um, Definitely, his experience resonates. Absolutely. Um, I think when you are the leader, you have to, you end up absorbing everyone else's stress and anxiety and all the things uh, that other person is going through. You can't help but put yourself and your needs in the back burner. And and as a leader, I think it's very difficult to, unless you have a mentor that you really connect with or
mhm.
someone,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to um, find a place, to find someone to go and just be open up and be vulnerable, because you have to be the strong one.
Mm,
Mm,
And I, you know, for me, for myself, I didn't even realize I was doing this, but I was just coping by coming home and basically shutting down for a few hours because I just couldn't
mhm.
interact with anyone or
Yeah.
about anything. And again, I didn't even realize this for a long time, is that, and my family suffered because of that,
mm,
because I need, because especially because I'm a complete introvert, right? But when you are at workplace, you're constantly just interacting with someone and absorbing all that energy that you have to process and you have to be able to take care of. Um, yeah. So it, it's and I appreciate where he talks. I think he talked about, thinking that self care is selfish, right?
mm,
But it's not. I mean, it's essential, and I wish that somewhere, along the line, that it can actually be built into um,
mm.
the work itself, and that it can be um, um, it
Accepted
can,
as part of the work.
yeah, it can be something that's thought of as positive thing,
Mm.
encouraged and positive.
You made me think about one section in the book. Sorry, Jessica, I'll let you chime in just after this. I want to catch this because I thought it was really powerful what Dee mentioned. Page 150, halfway down, it gets to the part where the police are outside of his, not his door, but his street, and they're intimidating him by their presence and stuff. And he walks through the front door, and it says this: I made my way past the cops' cars and walked up my front steps and through my front door. When I got inside, I hid my anxiety from Janelle, his wife. In my maladaptive way of experiencing trauma, I felt the way to protect my family was to hide my pain and project strength and courage.
Mhm.
That's what came up for me when you shared what you shared, Dee, because I have been guilty of doing that time after time, where I I see my weakness as I see vulnerability as a weakness, and I
Mhm.
don't see it as actually it's just an indicator, like a red light that just goes on to say you need help. You need help, or you need to stop, or you need to slow down, or whatever it is, whatever
Mhm.
the voice is. I just thought that was really interesting. Thanks for sharing that, because it definitely resonated with me. Jessica, did you wanted to? Oh, sorry.
No,
Want to
no,
go
no,
on?
just
Well, what are you speaking to? What I just.
yeah, I was just gonna say real quick that
Mhm,
as people of color, I love how he had articulated that too. As
mhm,
people of color, we all have our own forms of trauma,
mhm,
and we're just not allowed.
mhm,
We're we're not allowed to show vulnerability at the end of the
mm,
day. As women, we're not allowed, you
mm,
know. And he talks about being a black man versus,
mm,
a black woman, and each in our, ethnicities, are we allowed to show? I remember in a session with a colleague, she said, Annabelle, you can cry about it. And I said to her, I'm a black woman. I'm not allowed to cry about it. And
mm,
it was implicit. It was just or sorry, reactive. It was just, I'm not allowed to just cry.
mm.
Like, you can't show that. Um, so just to piggyback what you were saying is that there is, this sense of shame, and it comes up.
Mm.
I think more so than maybe our white counterparts.
So this is really interesting. I don't think he covers this, or maybe no, I don't think he does, because you just mentioned something that, as a man, I don't always realize, but women get translated by the way that they present themselves in ways that us men don't always realize. So, for instance, the tears on a man's cheek are different to the tears on a woman's cheek. They mean different things to society.
Mm,
And, you know, for for a man, a certain way of expressing yourself is, it's not aggression, it's strength or leadership. But for a woman, it's translated as, um, help
It's
me out.
translated as being too emotional,
Hmm.
PMSing,
Right, right,
being manipulative.
right. So, the freedom to be able to express one's own identity in any given scenario is not a freedom that every single person occupies. I have a
mhm,
level of freedom to be emotionally vulnerable in front of a crowd of individuals, and people might turn around and say, that pastor's really tuned in, he's really checked in, such a vulnerable guy, versus someone else, a woman pastor, who might go up there and start crying. You see that this is why we shouldn't have women pastors. They just get so emotional. And I think that's something worth noting, because in the work of self-care, I'm trying to learn to say that now, in the work of self-care, we're also trying to hold space for the real you that you cannot be
mhm,
in society. I hope
mhm,
I'm making sense by saying that.
mhm.
Yeah. Sorry, I've stolen your mic, Jessica, for a long time. I'm giving it over to you.
What was your question?
I was just asking. Well. Okay, here's the question. What are the parallels between what McBride was talking about in his experiences between him and you?
Um, I have gone through everything he went through, and actually, I was talking to my psychologist this week about it. And one of the things that he talks about, and I did talk about during therapy, it was the expectation of constantly being available. And if you're not, you fear to be seen as weak. And one of the things we talk about is like, for example, in my culture, I'm Mexican. We are supposed to be always available. We are supposed to always sacrifice ourselves for the good of others. And we were talking about there has to be a balance. And one of the things that I have learned over the years in therapy is like you cannot take care of other people if you do not take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. If you're not 100% there, healthy, you cannot take care of your kids. You cannot function completely as a human being and accomplish what you want.
So, sorry to interrupt you, Jessica. Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
Do you think that comes from your Mexican culture, or do you think it comes from somewhere else?
It is a culture. It's like, and also the way we are, that's another point I was going to say. Also, it comes from, we talk about the way we are raised also. So it's like a mix of both. But he talks about, when he was talking about that, that we become hesitate to do self-care because we're going to be weak. For example, I was struggling and it took me a year and a half to go back to therapy. And then she asked me, why did it take you so long? And I said, because I didn't want to be seen as weak. I have been already for 2 years in therapy, and you gave me you're good, you can do this on your own. And then I started struggling again. So it is hard to admit that we need help or we need to take care of ourselves. And also, self-care doesn't look the same for everybody. Some people don't have the financial stability to take time off. So I have learned like he talks about like not everybody have the means to go to take off a whole week and go on vacations with their family. So we have to become creative. And in my case, I do not know how to stay still. And my brain is always. And one of the ways that I do practice self-care, especially when I do care deeply about social justice. And I empathize with other communities and minorities of what they're going through. And sometimes it can be too overwhelming. And I have learned to take a step back, and I'm not being selfish. Sometimes we think that taking care of ourselves is selfish, but it is not. And one of the things that Annabelle was asking earlier is like examples of how Jesus was taking care of himself. And one of the things is he created the Sabbath, and it's just not just like a day of rest. It's like a day to reset. That's an example. Another one is like Jesus often withdrew to pray and to rest. And that's one thing that Darlene was talking about earlier. I'm a huge introvert. Like I have social skills, but talking or interacting with people drains me really badly. To the point where I have to come with that system that when I come home, and it was a really hard day at work, I will tell everybody in my house, I need just some time to decompress and I'll be back. And after I get my space, I come back like, okay, here we go. What do you guys need from me? And Jesus did that. He withdrew to pray and to rest. And I think it's like we need to practice more of that. It's not just I'm gonna go pray. It's like I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna withdraw. I'm gonna recharge in order for me to be 100% in what I'm trying to do, preparing to serve better. And it's not just praying, it's reflection, it's rest, and also recognizing that we are not meant to do everything alone. And that's hard. It's hard for me to rely on other people, to rely on my community. And I think that's the challenge, but I think that's how I would tie it up to what he was going through and how Jesus, it's an example of self-care.
It's interesting too, because as you said that, I thought about kind of what Dee was saying, the idea of mentorship. I, you know, Jesus when he was praying to God. He was going back to a baseline. He was checking in with his baseline, with the ultimate mentor, if you will. And coming, and so, and I think that you make an excellent point there in that, you know, yes, we detach from the world, and in the Sabbath, we are detaching from the world because essentially, when you think about the world that we live in, at least in the United States, it's all about productivity. We have to be productive, we have to produce something, constantly going, and then, recognizing that self-care is not necessarily just about, this beautiful vacation, that it is about coming to your baseline, coming in back to the baseline, which is the Lord who moves you. Um, so I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
So this resonates so much with me. I think the way that the Sabbath has been framed in Christianity has done a disservice to how God is intended us to receive it. I think that the way that the Sabbath has been framed, particularly within the Seventh Day Adventist movement, is very much a case of it's a rule that you have to follow. And when we approach that in that way, it becomes oppressive, burdensome, tiresome. It becomes the opposite of rest. It becomes, I remember growing up and it was just the one day we couldn't watch all the cartoons. It was the one day that we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that, we couldn't do this, couldn't do that. Here's the reframing that I don't think Ben McBride intended to do, but he did it anyway. Right at the end, page 167, halfway down, rest too is an act of resistance. What if we reframe the Sabbath as an act of resistance against all the humdrum that takes place in the world, the cogs that turn, that force you to have to get out, make money, bring it in to survive and support your family, or even if you want to bring in the moral aspect of I'm doing this to help someone. What if the Sabbath was an act of resistance that was planned? Nowhere in scripture do I see Jesus coming to the stage where he was just like, I can't do this anymore. I just need some time to just pull away. It was planned. Jesus planned to pull away. He planned to stop. He's planned to slip out of the crowd and go off and do his own thing individually. Like it was so calculated, So let's, all right, here's the case study that's going in my head of my own personal self. There was a moment one time last year where I was reaching burnout and I was ready to come and preach on a Sabbath morning at Eastside. I woke up in the morning and I felt completely spent and overwhelmed. There was nothing more than I wanted to do was to call someone, maybe an elder, and say, I just can't preach today. I can't do it. It was like 9 o'clock in the morning and I didn't want to do it. And you know what? I got out of bed, jumped in the shower, packed my things, and I drove down and I preached anyway. Question, would it have been acceptable for me to make a call and say I can't do it?
No.
It wouldn't have been acceptable?
Oh no, it would have been. I thought you said
Okay.
unacceptable.
Oh, I thought I was getting judged here.
No.
No, it wouldn't have
You
been
gotta
acceptable.
be on all the time.
But here's my point. Here's my point. I wouldn't have got to that stage if I had factored in rest as part of my life so that I wouldn't affect the responsibility of the work. Because if I'd responded to earlier signals that my body was giving me to say that I was getting to the point that things were overwhelmed, or I hadn't planned my rest to pull away, to stop, maybe a week before, or on the Tuesday, or on the Wednesday, or 2 weeks before, I have a very bad habit of not taking my holiday and not taking my vacation, I wouldn't get into the stage where I would be, I can't do this. I think what Jesus teaches us is to plan and to curate those spaces as part of the work. Something that I need to do better on.
Can I just say something though? You're not that important. I mean, each one of us, we are all replaceable. The work will be done.
Mm-hmm.
We're not that important in terms of getting the work done.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as though, for me at least in this past year, recognizing that I am replaceable and, surrendering to that concept is I think at the same time is very important.
I don't, I mean, I don't, this is just semantics, but I don't think of it as in terms of importance, but I think it's the responsibility, because you are in this certain position, especially of a leadership, you have the responsibility, you carry that responsibility with you. And it's very difficult to let that go, spite of your mental, affecting your mental health, physical health, all of that. And I think this is why it's so essential, I think, for anyone in doing this type of work, especially ministering to other people. You got to have somebody who's got your back. You got to have that, and you got to be able to identify, feel those people. Like this author talked about the loneliness, the isolation that he felt. Well, during this time when everything broke out and people were actually, there were people who were turning against him. There were people who were moving away from him. That's one of the most loneliest time a person can go through, and nothing hurts more than that, and I think especially like Pastor Sam, people in the leadership where you're constantly giving, you need somebody who's going to have your back.
Yeah, definitely.
It would have been so nice if Pastor Sam could just call somebody and say, hey, really need a day off today.
Oh, D, I could have. I chose not to. I do have people. There's tons of people at Eastside who I can call, but I chose not to because of the maladaptive way that I was dealing.
And that's what I'm getting at there.
Yeah, but I do understand the responsibility. So here's my reframe. The responsibility of kingdom work requires you to be responsible in your own mental and physical health.
There you go.
There you go. You cannot step up and do the work if you don't accept the full responsibility. You can't take the whole thing and take out chapter 7. You have to include chapter 7, whatever that meant for you. Jessica, so you wanted to say something?
Yeah, you were talking. I do agree with what Dee said, and also I'm glad that you have a support group that you can call in and rely on. And I do understand at the same time that it is hard to say, no, I got this. I can do it, even when you're going to burn out. And also, you said something earlier about Jesus was conscious and planned to withdraw and go for praying. How can we apply? And it just reminds me of something about how did I personally apply that to my life. I have been burned out. I have been exhausted. I have been to the point where I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm done. And I had to learn to schedule, to plan time off for me. And it's like, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I just told my therapist this yesterday. Sabbath, to me, I used to see it like an obligation. I must to do this. Like you said, like we cannot do this. Now I look forward to Sabbath, to go to church, to get up, to dress, to put my makeup on, to show up, to hear you preach, to sit down and talk to people while I'm having potluck, and then come back home. I told her it's 3 hours of my day, but 3 hours that they are my social life. They're like, it's something in that community that it brings me peace. It doesn't drain me. So I look forward to it. I force myself, even if I don't want to go, to do it because I know it's good for me. And I told her also during the day, I schedule an hour at least at nighttime for me. Just for me to do whatever I want, listen to a book, read a book, watch a movie, watch a TV show, but it's an hour for me. And during the week, I have a specific day, and it's Mondays. No one is home. I don't have to drive the kids, no therapy, no after-school activities, no nothing. They just go to school and come back. So Mondays mornings when I'm home and no one's here, it's my time. It's quiet. I try to get ahead, like no cooking or do the bare minimum in order for me to be able to keep going. So it's like Jesus. I plan. It's hard, yes, because you have to figure out what works for you and for your schedule. But when I do plan about how am I gonna take care of myself, I do plan even if I don't want to. I force myself to stay still and make that priority in order for me to function. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say when you say that Jesus planned. An example with me, I do plan. I force myself.
But it's beautiful because what I get from that is stillness is so crucial to movement. We live in a world where movement is just pressured on people to constantly be in motion, but there is a reason why the rhythm of stillness was commanded to us, because God knew we would need it. And there's a reason why it is the only commandment where he says, remember. Because he knew full well that we were going to forget. In the name of, I need to look after my family. In the name of, I'm fighting against injustice. In the name of, I'm helping the marginalized. In the name of all of these things, to use his illustration, from the very get-go in Genesis chapter 1, God was like, put your oxygen mask over your own face first before you decide to proactively go out and help someone else. Yeah. I definitely think that was something that was prevalent. So we've experienced this chapter. What next?
Can I just add that as one thing that I do struggle with in the concept of planning, in the concept of self-care, is my love of scarcity. So, and what I mean by that is there, for me, growing up in Jamaica, you don't have a lot. And so the concept of going to church, like you said, it's an obligation. It's not this restful period. I look at a calendar and I'm planning out vacation, and I think to myself, Annabelle, who are you to do this? You think you're so, fantastic. You know, the the scarcity comes back. Remembering, my parents working on a vacation, remembering the fact that we didn't have vacations growing up. We, we saw family and, that sort of thing, but it wasn't a vacation necessarily. Um, and so I think that that's what I struggle with with self-care. I struggle with, confronting my own fear of scarcity, if you will.
Or maybe, because I think this is a relatable thing for all of us, maybe we negate healthy forms of Sabbathing because it doesn't look like socialized forms of Sabbathing.
Mm,
Maybe we're so used to a vacation has to look like getting on a plane, going to an island with beautiful weather, sitting on a beach. And I think the spirit is trying to say something to you, Jessica. Um, but maybe we're so conditioned with the notion of what it has to apparently look like that we minimize the value of, example, you stopping with your daughter and saying, you know what, 2 Sundays from now, we're just gonna, it's just gonna be us. We're gonna cook a meal together, light a few candles, and we're just gonna have a very special time where we just share some really great time. Like, do
I see
you know
what
what
you're
I'm trying to
saying.
say?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
I
I
think
think that's a great point. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think the
yeah.
value of, I think growing up when we didn't have much, I never saw the value of those intimate moments because I saw it as the oppression of poverty. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
poverty in comparison to other people, but in my child's head, it was poverty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and I think we need to do a better version of reconditioning what does what what does rest actually look like for all people,
Mm-hmm.
not just for the privilege. Now we are more privileged where we're just like, you know what? Which country should I go to? Which flight should I book? All these kinds of different things. I'm not saying they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying they fit into a mold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the spirit saying to you, Jessica? Because I saw some stuff happening and
Oh no, I was just thinking about when that happened. I was thinking about ah, the idea just went to my head.
it's
I
okay.
was thinking about when we're talking about all this mental health and all this stuff. One of the other things that he has to face when he was struggling with his mental health, and I think he said something about it earlier, when his allies, the people who have been working with him shoulder to shoulder, distance themselves from him. That's hard. With the police he's been working in order to breach are the ones now trying to intimidate him and showing up not just to near to his house, showing to he said he didn't work with the organization, but he was like a volunteer, showing there also to intimidate him. And it's just like it reminded me of how that as a human being, it takes a toll on you also. And that he said that it became so much for him, everything that was going on, how he has to put a face in order to keep his family safe and calm, make a plan when he went to the church and have his, I don't know if it was his parents or his father, mother-in-law to take his kids. And all that stuff, all that pressure is also, it takes a toll on you. And he talked about like, he put it away for so long that eventually it catch up to him a few years later. And it got me thinking, like, how can we, because some people would like to tie this up to the Bible and Jesus. And Jesus went through that too. Peter was one of his closest friends. And what happened when he went to when Jesus got arrested? Peter denied him, afraid. He was afraid to be associated with him. The other thing is like some of the religious leaders, they believed in Jesus also, but they stayed quiet. Why? Because they were afraid that what would happen to them. And to go through that, and McBride humanizes what happened to Jesus and relates to it as what is happening to him, and it ties up to self-care. When it became too much for Jesus, I'm saying like he is God, but he is in a human form. And this is something that's what he was resting and withdrawing and praying and planning to remind us also that as humans, we need that.
That's such a salient point.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's all.
That's such a salient point. We could continue talking on and on. We do need to bring things to an end. Let me just finish with this final question. So we've read this chapter. What insight or challenge are you taking away from this chapter? In essence, I'm asking, what changes? What's the act that comes from a result of this conversation, this chapter for you? I need to create spaces where I rest as part of the work and not separate from the work, because the rest contributes to the work. I need to actively create spaces. So I need to sit down, look at my calendar, and block off time that I'm going to do X or Y or Z.
For me, it's I need to submit to God's concept of rest. Let go of my ego, let go of the face, and submit to God's concept of rest.
To me, what I took from this chapter was everything he went through. At the end of the day, it showed me the importance of community. When he was going to the church to preach, even though he knew they were making threats for him not to speak that day, the people of the church didn't back down. They showed him support. He called one of his friends to show up, and he showed up to the church to keep an eye, to watch out for him. Then later on, when it became too much for him, he called to that friend that showed up to church and another friend that he talked about at the beginning of the book. And he said he broke down to them. He started crying.
The right-wing white guy.
Yes.
The evangelical, yeah.
And then that, it reminded me the importance of community and having an inner circle to people to rely on and to be yourself. With creating a safe space for you to have a breakdown and be vulnerable and be like, this is what's happening to me. Because we have to remember that we are, at the end of the day, we are humans. We have feelings and we deal with complex feelings. And everything he was going through, he was scared. He was going through with it. He was doing what he thought it was right to his values and what he thinks it is right. But deep down, he was scared. But I was happy to read is that he had the community and the inner circle that provides him the comfort and the support that he needed. And that it is hard to find and to create. Because sometimes it's easier for us to isolate ourselves and think, I can do this on my own. And it was a reminder that we need people to support us, to be there to catch us. That's what I took from this chapter.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What do you think, Dee?
I think, we get so busy working and reacting and trying to come up with solutions that oftentimes we don't really stop to self-reflect. And I think the self-reflection is probably one of the best way to, I think, protect yourself from, I guess, from burning out, from, I think even from getting discouraged. I think, and also it helps you to be able to gain strength and learn. And I think the second thing is having grace towards yourself. I think we hardly do that. We hardly ever do that. And I think that's another essential thing that we have to do for ourselves.
So I'm going to support your statement with a quote on page 165, right at the bottom. And he's thinking about his therapy and stuff. And he says, when I realized the trend I don't like, I engage with more therapy and work on continuing the healing journey. Then he says, I've learned and I'm learning that reflection is my salvation, not another protest. And he says that within the context of not having enough self-care before he's ready to go out and protest again. There is power in that. Oh, we could continue talking about this on and on. This was a very heavy chapter because I think it got really close to our stories. And I hope that it got close to your stories too, dear listener. But we do have to come to an end with this conversation. As you can see, this book is taxing, but it's surgery. That's what it is for me. It's surgery. Next week, we'll be diving into chapter 8. Do Something Now is the title of the chapter. And so we are inviting you into the next part of that. Thank you for joining us on this discussion. And we hope and pray that you stay blessed and that you rest well until we see you next. God bless you. Bye.